Alright, this is going to be kind of an unscripted, off the top of the head type of video, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about scriptable objects, how they can be used, and what's nice about using them. So I have this class in my pre-existing project called the Central Game Manager that just manages a ton of stuff. And as we can see, it has a lot of serialized fields, which means you can see these in the inspector. What this looks like, so if we come back to the project, if we look up an example of the Central Game Manager, you can see this is my prefab object, and you can see it has all this data that I need to manually enter. What this means is that everywhere I have a Central Game Manager, I would need to make sure that this data is the same throughout, or there might be discrepancies in the game and the way the game runs. So Scriptable Object would be helpful to make sure that every instance of a Central Game Manager game object references the same set of data, so there is no way for them to be desynced. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I have a 3D printer running next to me, so hopefully that's not too annoying. Okay. So to create, I have an empty mono behavior here, and that'll actually be the first thing we want to change. So we want to change mono behavior to scriptable object. Next thing we want to do is we want to add this create asset menu attribute with the menu name equals whatever we want. What this will do is this will allow us to, if we come back here, allow us to create an instance of the data, the way I have audio data, room data. So I'm not going to put it under, actually I'm going to put it under a field called miscellaneous, and I'm going to go ahead and called game. So we're going to do game/game data. Okay. Now if I go ahead, there's one more attribute I want to add, which is system.serializable. That just means that this data can be saved. So I'll go ahead and hit save. I'll let it reload its domain. And now if we come here, hit create, you can see there's game and there's game data. So now I can create a game data. And I can say it's just call this game data. I don't want this under prefabs, so I'm going to go ahead and put this under this folder called game. Here is our game data. So you can see it doesn't have anything in it because it is still very much an empty script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to move a lot of these attributes over to the game data. So I'm just going to move scenes and dungeons. I'm not going to move the private variables because this is still unique to every instance of the Central Game Manager. I'm not going to move the testing for the same reason. So now I have these attributes. Now, the scriptable object's not going to be in charge of any of the logic itself. It's just going to be a storage container. So now I have the ability to store this stuff in, but I don't have the ability, and here we can go ahead and show that real quick. Game data, you can see now has all this stuff. So now I can add in my opening scene, which is hub remastered. I can copy in the dungeon, as well as the tutorial, which I believe a lot of these actually go unused. If I come to Central Game Manager, yeah, you can see opening scene was hub, tutorial was none, dungeon was the dungeon. So this is actually used. So I can come back here to my game data. We want reference to the dungeon scene, which is right here, and then dungeons. The way this game works is first it goes from the forest to the graveyard. So we have all this set up. So how do we access this stuff from the Central Game Manager now? Because if you notice, now that I've removed these fields, just commented it out so I can see what I did remove, I'm getting errors throughout because it doesn't know what opening scene means. So there are two things I need to do. I need to give my Central Game Manager reference to the game data, and I need to give game data a way to export essentially the stuff. So I'm going to create what are called properties. So I'm going to organize my code. I'm just going to create a region called properties, and that just makes anything in this region collapsible. So if I have code in here, I can just hit this little bit and it's collapsible. So kind of a nice little code organization. So we're going to go with public scene field And because I don't use tutorial, I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete it. So scene field, and what's the name? We're going to do opening scene with capitals. We're going to use the word get, and then we're going to do return opening scene. And that is all it is. We're going to repeat this for the dungeon and dungeons. So we'll do public scene field dungeon. I'm going to rename this to dungeon scene, and then get return dungeon. I'm also going to rename this to dungeon scene, just so it's explicit in the variable name what type we're looking for. We're looking for a scene field type. And do the same thing for our dungeons. So we're going to do public dungeon data array called dungeons, get return dungeons. Okay. If you want this variable to be able to be modified, you can also do a setter. So we could do set opening scene is equal to value. However, we don't want anything besides ourselves and the inspector to be able to modify these values. So I'm going to go ahead and not have a setter for any of these. Okay. So now we can go ahead and hit save. Now we need to give reference to our central game manager. So I'm going to come here, we're going to create a private and then game data. And I'm just going to call this game data. Okay, now I could serialize this and then I would drag in a reference to it. However, that would lead to the same issue, which is if we have multiple game datas, how do I make sure that they have the same one? So I have another system I will probably make a separate video about called a data dictionary. So I'm going to go ahead and open it here. Okay. So this script's whole purpose is, you'll see it's a mono behavior, is it contains references to commonly needed data. So I'm going to create a new reference to a private game data called game data. And what this does is this actually loads the resources from the resource folder dynamically. So I don't need to drag in references anywhere, which is really nice. So what I'm going to do is, this is where I'm loading in all of these. So I'm going to do initialize our game data is equal to get resource of type game data. And again, I'll be explaining this a little later. Just know that this is dynamically loading it. We're going to assume the name of our resource is called game data. Okay. Now I need to copy one of these to get reference. So this is one of those properties as well. So I'm going to copy our audio data and refactor it to work for game data. So this is going to be of type game data. This is going to return something called game data. This is going to get resource game data and game data. And then this is going to be return instance dot game data. All right, and then I also need to return this to instance dot game data. Okay, this should be up and working perfectly. So now we need to give reference to the game data from the data dictionary into our central game manager. So that's going to happen in awake. So what we're going to do is you'll see I have done this for other settings. So we're going to do game data is equal to data dictionary dot game data. Boom, we're done. Now what I need to do is I need to change these references to, instead of just opening scene, I need to do game data dot capital opening scene. Okay, and then I need to find everywhere else that this does that. So game data dot capital opening scene. Oop, lowercase game data. There we go. Okay. I've gotten rid of the tutorial, so I'm just going to comment this out. Again, this is stored in game data now, so game data dot capital D dungeons. And then this is going to be game data dot capital D dungeon scene now. Same thing here. I'll copy that, and this is dungeons, and this is dungeons. And that is everything. So I can go ahead here, click save. let it do its little thing. And no errors related to the scripting, good. So now if I look at my Central Game Manager, you see it only has this debugging part. It doesn't have the fields it used to have. So what I need to do now is I need to move my game data from wherever I put it in game, and I need to move it to this specially marked folder called Resources. Resources puts it, when you build the game, puts it in a special place that anything can access it through the directory. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here, game data, and you can see this is where all of my other datas live. So now anytime I want to change this, I can go ahead and put it there, and the Central Game Manager will automatically load it from this location in Resources, or rather it will, the data dictionary will load it, and then the Central Game Manager will grab that. So that's pretty much it. This is just was a quick little video on showing kind of the utility of scriptable objects, to show that they can be used to centralize the storage of data in a way that if you need multiple objects reaching out to them, you can ensure, or rather multiple objects that need to store the same data, rather than having that attached to the instance of that class, you can create a scriptable object that stores all that.